Welcome to our fourth edition of the 2017 Legislative Forum for Perry, Oklahoma. I'm pleased to have with me, as always, Senator A.J. Griffin, Representative John Pfeiffer, and Representative Janice Casey. We are here to talk about the legislative process, and you guys have been in the middle of the legislative process for quite a few months now, and it's going hot and heavy. Tell me what's going on. Budget, 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 is that the word of the day?
Yeah. Lack of budget, lack of budget, lack of budget. If we all three kind of look like we've been beat up, that's because I think that's how we feel. This is the part of the session that's crunch time. I usually think most of the time this stuff has to completely break down so that we can get to the point where people start getting serious about voting on the measures that are necessary. The difference is, for me, I believe that this session we're going to vote on a balanced budget. It won't contain a lot of one-time money because we just don't have it. It's all been spent in previous sessions. So we will have a balanced budget at the end of the day. What the day is that we end on remains to be seen. We've got to get some more revenues, and we're having a hard time finding a revenue raiser that 75% of both chambers will agree upon.
It's extremely frustrating. As pointed out before, the state of Oklahoma has never not gotten a budget. There's been several times we've had to go into special session. I think there was once way back in the 40s. It took us 10 out of the 12 months of the year to get a budget. Eventually we will get it. I know it's extremely frustrating for all of us. We were talking before we started. I can't even imagine what it's like for the people at home. It kind of reaches this point every year where nobody wants to do really tough things in the building, and that's politics. We've kind of reached a point, at least in my estimation, we have a lot of people that realize we have revenue problems. They realize we can't keep going on the way we've been going on. They just don't want to have to be the ones to make these tough votes. Unfortunately, it's our job. That's what we got elected for. And there's nobody else who can do it for us. So we're just going to have to do the best we can with what we have. And like Senator Griffin said, getting that magical number of 76 votes on the House is an extremely high threshold, and it's very hard to do.
I'm not going to let my frustrations come out, but I have a lot of frustrations, and just to kind of let you know that you have to respect other members because they have issues and errors. For an example, one of the things that have frustrated me is not having a conversation in caucus on GPT. And all I say, I'm not saying this is what we need to do. I'm just saying there should be a conversation, and it gets deflected, and we don't get a conversation on that. And so, what it appears, and this is for me, it appears to me is that in order to help somewhat not to hit all these severe cuts that basically bloodies the room for your agency and a few other ones, is that we've kind of looked out there and we've gotten quite a few revenue measures that have moved forward, but they're pennies on a dollar. And a lot of those come forward due to the fact that that person doesn't really have a voice. And so this is the reason those lobbyists make a lot of money, the good ones, is because they're able to say, we're not going to do this, not going to do that. And to give you an example, the historical tax credit is $7 million, okay? It's never hit $7 million. So all we wanted to do was to cap it. The lobbyists killed it. Now, it may come back, but my point, how can that be? Seriously, how can that be? And then you look at the affordable housing, it's $4 million. We wanted to move it to $2 million. This is recurring revenue, which is very important. I sat on the budget team, and hindsight will tell you some of the mistakes we made in the 2 years that I sat on that was that we didn't do enough things for recurring revenue and took a lot of one-time money. And you'll say, well, why did you do that? Well, the reason we did that is because we felt like at any time things would pick up, the economy would, the price of oil would go, stuff like that. So you didn't want to go back, and recurring revenue usually comes out of your wallet some way, okay? Whether it's your left side or your right side, it comes out of your pocket, everybody's pocket. And so people don't like to vote on that because it's going to have an effect to the constituents back home. So in hindsight, we probably should have obviously 2 years ago started working on recurring revenue. Well, if we've learned anything, we've learned that we've got to do some of these things. Well, the problem is that what's important to me is not important to somebody else, vice versa. And so that's the frustration. So I'm not willing to vote on this over here because you won't do anything about this over there. And so at some point, whether it be in the Senate leadership or the House leadership or the governor's office or whoever, at some point somebody will have to blink. Right now, nobody's blinking. Okay? And so that's the dilemma that we're in. And we know, I mean, like, especially myself and AJ, we've been there long enough, and John knows now too, that it's like this every year. It just, this year's, what makes it different was we're getting closer and closer. But sitting there for the last 2 years, I saw all this. But, you know, so it is frustrating. It is extremely frustrating.
Well, and the other frustration is because of the state question 640, the supermajority threshold is just, I mean, if we just had to have a majority for revenue raisers, we'd be done. We would be finished. We would have a balanced budget, we'd have everything funded at the levels that we feel is appropriate, and we'd be talking about how to get home. But because of the passage of that state question, it is just, and this is the first time in my tenure that we've needed to vote on revenue raisers. First time we've actually had to make these tough choices.
And I will tell you, the Senate and House is different in the aspect that we have to have some Democrat votes to pass any revenue measures. They do.
Actually, so do we.
Do you? Okay.
We do.
And in our case, I think the frustration comes, and I'm going to tell you that there's plenty of blame to go around, okay? So I'm not about pointing a finger, but from the minority party, when you have a person that's more interested in campaigning for a governor than he is trying to have a budget, and there's no compromise at all, it's my way or the highway, that's not a compromise. And so that's the aspect we're at. It, you know, for me, I've always said, come together when you're opposite and let's have a conversation. Well, you can't have a conversation because the next moment there's a press release at the ONQ or any place else. And so my frustration comes from the fact that there's a minority leader that's running for governor who, since he's been a minority leader for that caucus, they've done nothing but go down. And it's all about him. It's not necessarily his caucus. Well, the minority team, realistically, they have to stick together. That's the only way they have any clout. But there's plenty of those members that know that, you know, because I've talked to them, would say, well, I know. And so it just, like I say, for somebody that wants to be the governor and is not doing what's best for the state, that's frustrating. And I'm not just blaming him. We got plenty of stuff within our own camp that frustrates me too. But I mean, that's an aspect, because basically what you're saying is unless you do everything we want, we'll never get to 76.
And that's what we touched on a little bit the last time we were here, just kind of the numbers and the breakdowns in the House. We have 72 Republican members of the State House of Representatives. We have at least 10 of them on any given thing that won't vote yes on any kind of revenue raiser. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's where they stand, and at least they're honest and upfront about it. They're not telling you one thing and then voting another way. But to do that, even with that, we need some Democrat votes. And right now, it's the same thing when we tried to raise the cigarette tax last year. And I wish it was the other way, but unfortunately, all revenue raising measures have to start in the House. The Senate can't start them, we have to start them. But to do that, and we started these negotiations with Leader and long ago, even before session started, and it keeps moving the needle. It started with, okay, well, let's look at one progressive tax, something that impacts, the upper income earners, and then we'll look at something that affects everybody. And then it was, well, we won't look at anything unless we look at gross production tax. And then it was, we're not going to look at anything that doesn't raise gross production tax this much. And now it's, we won't look at anything that's not a 7% gross production tax.
Or raise the income tax.
Or raise the income tax. And so anytime you go to negotiate, he moves the needle. And hats off to Leader Inman. If we could get our caucus lockstep together, like he gets his.
Republicans don't do that.
Republicans have never been able to do that. And he's always done it. He locked them up against the cigarette tax last year, and it cost him some seats. But it helped him personally as he gears up to run against Drew Hermanson in the primary and whoever else appears in the general. There's absolutely there's no political wins for him to come forward with anything except exactly what he wants. It's kind of like the negotiation, or they say, well, the United States doesn't ever negotiate with terrorists because they keep changing their terms. The next time they're going to come back and want more. It's what the negotiations have been like this year.
You heard it here first. Representative Inman is a terrorist.
No.
Feels sad.
Okay, I'm going to throw some gasoline on the fire. That's what I'm here for. I'm to inspire debate. First of all, I want to say that it's fortunate that you have to make these decisions because we trust you all with those type of decisions, and that's why people elect you is to make tough decisions. But I think I'll take issue with the fact that you're saying this guy is running for office. Isn't everybody running for office? Aren't there a bunch of people in the House and Senate running for office? I mean, Dennis, let me ask you this, because you aren't running for office. Aren't there a lot of people that are jockeying for positions and voting and wondering what this will do to their reelection bid or their future?
Very few.
Very few?
Very few. I mean, you're looking at the insurance commissioner, you're looking at the treasurer, and you're looking at the governor on our side that I'm aware of. I'm not saying there's not something else, but
Then how can someone say that the lobbyists killed something? They don't have a single vote.
sure like to think that.
And I do need to correct Dennis, because
Okay.
he said the really good lobbyists make a lot of money. The really bad ones make a lot of money too. Well,
It goes back just to a tad, in all fairness to my colleagues. Like I say, I do represent District 35, and so it is different compared to somebody that represents Kingfisher County, for example, or somebody that represents, Oklahoma County or Tulsa County, and I get that. But for me, it doesn't matter which district you represent. You can't ask the working class person that's going out there and putting in their 40 or 50 or 60 hours a weekend to be the brunt of everything that we want to do. And that's the frustration. And a lot of times what lobbyists will tell you is well, if you do it to everybody, then I'm okay, because they're just worried about your job, getting paid. So they want to, and that's what they're paid for. In all fairness, they're paid to fight for their client or fight for whoever they want. But sometimes I'm just going, why?
Explain to the people why gross production tax is a bad idea, or increasing it is a bad idea. I don't think people understand what that is and why that is.
Gross production tax is also significantly overestimated as a piece of our state budget, and this happens all the time. They say, and I've heard people say, well, if we just raised gross production tax to 5% on all drilling, we wouldn't have a budget hole. That is
not true.
So far from the truth. We actually live and die by drilling. It's the number of the wells that really influences our state budget, because of all the economic activity that drilling inspires, not just the taxation of the production of oil. I do think that we need to look at
Have the
conversation about gross production, although we have, as part of what we are now affectionately calling the big bill, which is a combination revenue bill that has cigarette tax, gasoline tax, and about $56 million worth of tax rebate programs on the oil and gas industry that it would eliminate, which is actually a better revenue raiser than moving the gross production rate. Because for every percentage that we raise the introductory rate, that 3-month 2% or 3-year 2% incentive rate that they have, for every percent that we raise it, it really only brings in about an additional $14 million. It's not that much money. So the conversation has gotten hijacked a little bit. I think that's part of Speaker Inman's kind of his mode of operation is look at this, look at this. Well, that's really not what we should be looking at. The elimination of the rebate programs is excellent policy. It's something we should do. It's on there. We've got the votes. And the oil and gas industry is, at least the large ones, large producers are not fighting it at all. And we have, right now, the gross production rate in the state of Oklahoma is 2% for 3 years on new drilling, and then all wells go to 7%. All of them. There's a lot of misinformation around this issue.
That's the reason I say there needs to be the conversation, because of, for an example, some will say, well, in 3 years, 90% of it's depleted. And then somebody else will say, that's not true, it's 60%. And so my question is where did you get, tell me where you got to 60%? Yeah, I just want, that's the reason I want the conversation, because if you're gonna make difficult decisions, you need to have good information. And, you know, a lot of the information that comes out, guess where it comes from? From the people that stand out there in that thing called a lobby. And so all I want is, you know, factual information to make decisions, but if you're not gonna have a conversation, how do you make good decisions? And to a certain extent, I mean, what do you pay for income tax? What's your percentage you pay in Oklahoma?
It's about a third, I think.
No, I meant percent.
5%.
You pay
Oh, state tax,
okay,
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
5%. And so, nobody wants to do anything to hurt that organization. I mean, my goodness, that's silly. That's the reason there should be a conversation, so you can, you know, sit back, bring it all in, take a look, and yeah, we can do our own research, but, you know, for me, for example, I'm not an expert on oil and gas. And so, from that aspect right there, you know, I can't answer for John, but I can answer for me and AJ. AJ is, I'm getting all frustrated again, but I mean, we have people that literally had their homes destroyed. You know, I was 2 miles from the epicenter. I was fortunate that, since I don't have brick and mortar, that mine didn't fall down like my neighbors did. And, you know, so it's hard for me to sit there and say, you know, we're gonna raise the taxes on you so we can level this up, but we're not even gonna have a conversation with the other person. That's where I'm not saying I'm right, I'm not saying I'm wrong, I just want for both the Senate and the House to sit down and have that conversation and see what it looks like.
Why can't we have that conversation? I mean, you all control the House and the Senate. At least your parties do. Can that not be discussion on the floor, or does it have to be committee
Well,
work?
I will tell you, you know, I'll use an analogy that maybe some people can understand is I don't know what there is, but let's just say there's 100 teachers here at Perry Public Schools.
Mhm.
Well, they don't go to all 100 teachers to ask them every move. That's usually you have a superintendent and a board of education. Same way in the House.
I don't know. To me, and again, and Dennis and I have talked about this. It's everybody has to represent their own
Absolutely.
districts.
Absolutely.
I represent Grant County. Grant County used to have the lowest unemployment rate in the nation for several years, and that was a direct result of oil and gas drilling. Not oil and gas production, but it was oil and gas drilling. It's the same reason that all the motels over here out by the interstate outside of Perry used to be full, and they were building new ones because the rooms were booked. It's because we were drilling more oil. It's the when the price of oil fell and we quit drilling. It's the reason you didn't have to wait in line nearly as long at gas stations, because you weren't waiting behind roustabout crews. It's the reason you weren't getting passed by a whole bunch of white F-150s going 90 miles an hour. I don't know why company guys drive that fast, but they all do, probably because they're all in company pickups. To me, especially when you look down and break down the numbers, and what the senator said is absolutely right. For every % you raise gross production, you only bring in about $15 million to the state. And so much of that gross production is automatically picked off the top. It goes into 1017 fund, it goes into this, it goes into that. It doesn't actually bring in any more GR. To me, it was a much better plan to look at the tax credits and incentives that we gave the oil and gas industry, that a lot of them no longer needed, and say, okay, not only are we making more money, there's more money going into general revenue, and it doesn't impact their ability to drill. You know, President Reagan always said, you tax things you don't want to happen, you incentivize things you do want to happen. Oil and gas production in the state's a great thing, but we need more oil and gas drilling. That's how we get jobs back. And honestly, that's selfishly here, because I got to represent my district. We took a hit when we made the wind deal this year. It was the right thing to do for the state. The state made a bad deal. Any more hits? I mean, in District 38, we have a lot of oil, we have a lot of wind, we have a lot of agriculture, and outside of that, there's not just a whole lot else. And hitting 2 out of the 3 is tough for me. It's already getting hard enough because of the way because of the way our oil's produced and because of the formations we have and the formations we've been drilling in my district, they produce a lot of water, which creates a lot of problems. Unfortunately for us, maybe good for the state of Oklahoma, the scoop and the stack formations that are coming online don't produce a lot of water. We're already losing drilling to other parts of the state out of my district. So I have to weigh those variables on, okay, we have to balance the budget, but how do I keep all those jobs from moving out of my district and try to figure that out? And it is extremely difficult a lot of times.
Well, I just got a text from one of our party caucus whips asking me a question on something on wind, which of course my response was, won't even consider it until we pass the rebate bill on oil and gas. So that's what we're trying to, and my district spans, I got wind, I got oil and gas, I've got a little bit of everything. So those balancing acts, and then remembering that our job is to represent our district, and the person next to us, their job is to represent their district as well. You know, some of us, you were talking about the lobbyists. Influence is it's based on a combination of a lot of factors. And I'll say this, I know that I speak for the guys that represent Noble County with me. We're not three that are known to be pretty flappable when it comes to where we stand on things. Most people pretty much already know where we're gonna be before they even come to us.
Don't even ask.
Yeah, sometimes don't even get asked.
Yeah.
So I think we all have reputations for being kind of pretty solid in our, but not everybody's like that. And some people can have their opinion swayed because
Whoever's
of
in their ear
influence.
last.
Yeah.
Huh?
I said whoever's in their ear last is how they vote.
Yeah, that happens.
A lot.
Brian, you know, just to kind of give you a little bit of example, and this may not be a fair example, but you know, you've got the community of Perry, and you've got a lot of people in the community that own a business, and we'll just say that they're paying sales tax to the city, and the city recruits this other company to come in, and they'll say, if you'll come, what we'll do is we'll not charge you sales tax for 3 years. And you come in here and say, hey, that's a heck of a deal. But what happens to all the people that have been invested in Perry for all these years? My South is different than John's because most of my producers are small producers, the ones that drill straight down. They're paying 7%. And so I totally agree with what John, you know, I get that aspect. And even though I'm going to be a statesman and do what I think is best for the state, I also know that in District 35, I can be a little more vocal on my issue than what he can. So I totally respect that and totally get that. Again, I'm not asking that they go to 7%. I'm not asking if they go to 1 year. I just want the conversation to happen so that we can have that and get actual numbers. Because what I would say, and I could be very easily wrong, is when they throw out that 14, 15, 17 million, I'm saying that's money for the GR. They're not counting all the apportionments. I don't know if I'm right or not. It's been hard to get that answer. So it could be considerably more if we use the apportionments, like the 1017, what we send to gross production goes to school, gross production goes to roads and bridges, you know. So I don't know. That's the reason I just want the conversation so that when I do have the opportunity to make a vote, that I do it on good information. And then that's where you need to stand up and be a statesman and not just protect your entire district, which is, can't help it, it's my first priority, is to protect District 35. I mean, I can't help that. And I don't blame anybody else for not doing that either.
Well, if Inman realizing he can't back down, because his whole race is involved in that, one doesn't back down, his group doesn't back down, and if there is not a discussion because they will not do that, how do we ever get a budget?
The budget fails, somebody blinks. We're there every time. It's just more ramped up this time. Since I've been there, and you can't really count the first couple of years in the aspect that you weren't in the know, but as longer you're there, there's a good chance that you're going to be more into the know. You understand the game. And so from that aspect, I'm not necessarily panicking because I know eventually we will have to come together. And so we will. I don't know what that looks like. And for me, you know, I know where I stand. I know what I will support and won't. And so right now, I'm kind of like that, the person that, it's my ball, and if you don't allow me to get to play like I want to play, I'm just going to take and go home. I mean, I'll have to change that attitude before session's out, but I mean, that's how I feel, because I don't feel like my voice matters.
Let me digress a bit. I know we have a lot more to talk about the budget, I suspect. But it seems that the people of Oklahoma, everyone I talk to, are willing to do something more to help the budget.
Yep.
Is this a good time for us to look at doing away with the referendum several years ago that said it takes a supermajority to do budget bills? Is this a good time to address that and try to get that fixed?
You know, that was a citizen-led, it was a
It's a
referendum.
constitutional.
It-
I understand, I
and-
understand.
But it didn't come from the legislature, and but I don't think it's a good idea for the legislature to attempt to reverse
No.
the will of people, even though it would have to go back to a vote. I think if a group of citizens were to mobilize and put that back out, I think right now, if you put it back on the ballot in 2018, getting rid of it sails through. I think I would also be surprised if a repeal of term limits were placed on the ballot right now. I have a feeling it would pass, just because of the tenor of the public right now. But I think it's an absolute horrible idea for the legislature to attempt that.
They just want us to do our job.
Yeah.
And we'll get there. I'm telling you, we will get there. All right. It won't be everything that I want. It won't be everything they want. But we'll get there. I just from the aspect, it's just painful to get there. But there's no doubt at some point we'll. I hate to say the word blink, but somebody will. There'll be that compromise at some point.
And it will be, and again, because of the politics involved, we usually work on 2-year cycles. We have 2-year sessions. We usually get a free year to actually govern, and then we basically do policy work that people care about, publicly the second year, because it's going into an election year. Well, unfortunately, we're with the world the way it is, and governor races starting earlier. Everything seems to start earlier. In a year where we really needed to have basically that free year, free of politics, where we stepped up and made some big decisions and negotiated in good faith behind closed doors, figured out a compromise and went home. We didn't get that because these battles, instead of being fought out and negotiated around tables or in conference rooms there in the building, they're getting fought in the press. And so then, it's extremely frustrating when you negotiate with somebody within your own caucus or without, or even across the building sometimes, and before you can figure out, or they have time to respond to you, you get on Twitter, you get on News OK, or any of the social media outlets we have nowadays, and even normal media outlets, and you read their response before they can even get back with you with how it goes. And so instead of shutting the doors, turning off the cell phones, and saying, okay, we're gonna negotiate this thing out, it's okay, you throw something out, and I'm gonna take that deal, and I'm gonna post it on my Twitter, and then I'm gonna go hold a press conference and tell everybody why I'm smarter than you and your idea's bad. In all honesty, and I truly do believe in open and transparent government, and the freedom of the press and freedom of speech is the only thing that holds government in tandem. I can't help but think that if we spent 3 days and made everybody leave their cell phones outside the Capitol and locked everybody in a room and just say, okay, we're reaching a decision, we got 3 days to do it, we would be able to do it. But because of the external dynamics, and the old saying is you don't actually get taller when you just stand on somebody else's shoulders and say you're tall. Unfortunately, and Scott Inman, we have a personal relationship. He's not a bad guy personally. His politics are a little wrong, but his whole thing is to he would burn the whole state down if he could be governor over the ashes. And he believes his best chance of becoming governor is by letting the state crumble and blaming it on the Republicans, and then standing on what's left of our party and saying, look at how smart I am, look at how tall I am.
Well, let's switch to something else.
Something a little more cheery?
No, it's not going to be more cheery. It's going to be Yesterday in the news, the headline was there was a teacher, I don't remember what school it was, that was found with a bunch of syringes in her purse at school with drugs in her purse, and everyone's in an uproar, and in a couple months, that would be a misdemeanor. Maybe even a ticket and municipal charge. Is there anything being done to protect the schools from the results of 780? Is there anything that's going to require the cases to be filed in district court where we at least can get them some help and some therapy and some requirements of that? What is happening with 780?
The case you're referring to happened in Sapulpa. It's an incredibly frustrating thing, especially knowing what we know now. I know the House had passed some measures, drug-free school zone bills, stuff like that, that in the normal course of events didn't get heard in the Senate. As far as I know, in terms of rolling back 780, and even rolling back a little bit and putting some of the things back in place, we don't have anything out there right now. There's a few bills that are going to conference committee that they're still trying to work out some details, and there is some opportunities for some things like that to show back up. But as of right now, live rounds that have passed out of both chambers heading to the governor's desk, there's nothing like that. And when we talk about criminal justice reform and things like that, something that's really popped out to me the last couple weeks, it's extremely scary and bad policy when we take legal terms and turn them into political terms. Nonviolent is a legal term that's classified, that does a whole bunch, that's the way they classify crimes. Unfortunately, we've taken nonviolent crimes, started using it in politics, and when you just say nonviolent, it makes you think of things, makes you think completely different than what attorneys and especially prosecutors think is nonviolent. There was a man in Guthrie who got shot 36 times about a month ago. OSBI put out a warrant on a guy who ended up turning himself in. He had about either 4 or 6 felonies. And I had a constituent who called me and said, why isn't this guy in jail? And they pulled him up on the Oklahoma Supreme Court network and looked and saw his felonies. And I said, because all of his crimes are nonviolent crimes. And they said, no, it's not. He has a domestic assault, which is classified as nonviolent. Assault and just a whole list of stuff that that when you hear the word assault, you don't think nonviolent, but because we've reclassified a legal term into political terms.
Isn't it strange that was the old system? That's not the new system. I mean, this person was out with all these crimes, and we're not under 780.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if you can blame 780 for that. The bottom line, it comes down to what you said, funding. I mean, if you're actually going to lock somebody up and throw away the key, and when they do get done with their time, that they're actually worse than they came in.
But Dennis, that assumes that people that with possession crimes are going to prison. And
No, I'm just referring to what we were
Right.
talking about.
Okay.
This gentleman, that
Yeah.
he didn't fall under 780. He was out there because the system itself has got issues long before that.
Right.
I think it's like anything. I'll go back into my years as an educator. We did outcome-based education. That was going to save everything, and it just blew up. And then we did all this testing we're doing now. So I think that what we have to be extremely careful, and I think that's the reason a lot of those bills end up having their title struck, is it's like, let's be careful that we don't move in a direction that you go from one extreme to the next, and you get what you get. I think you have to kind of somewhat make sure there's going to be funding to do what it is they're going to do, and tiptoe in it, not just go full bore and dive in and expect everything to be all rosy, because we know it's not. I mean, if anybody's probably spent the time to educate me on how things work, it's been you. And so it's pretty eye-opening as those bills come through, because guess who comes in my head when they're talking about that? It's you, from what you've told me and taught to me, because that's not going to be my area either. When you tell me basically that person has done a whole lot more if they're actually going to prison. And so a lot of people who basically probably made that vote, if they would have actually had Brian pop in their head, they would probably realize too, but you can't go educate everybody about every detail. And so,
And I'll say, if we don't properly fund mental health and substance abuse treatment in the state, it's not gonna matter, because the problem is just gonna become so pervasive. That woman, that teacher, obviously has a very serious addiction. She should be charged with child endangerment, even if the other is a misdemeanor, pile on some charges there. But she obviously needed treatment before she got arrested.
amazing.
And we have a shortage and I get frustrated because we keep hearing from folks, we need to eliminate fraud and waste in government. Our Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services is the most efficient state agency in state government, and I have studied it extensively. The services are provided almost exclusively by contracted community partners. So these are agencies just in our own backyards that are doing the services. We just don't have enough. And because what they do very well, operate on a shoestring administrative budget of the administrative cost of less than 3%. Less than 3. 97% of what we put into mental health treatment in the state of Oklahoma actually pays for treatment. And it's impressive, we just really need to fund the system.
There's some people that say that part of the problem began way back when the state decided to close down the mental health facilities and not provide some of the mental health care that they used to provide years ago.
Well, it's been shown that community-based outpatient treatment is actually much more cost-effective and more effective in the long run than hospitalization. And running state hospitals is extremely expensive, and we still operate one large state hospital. The rest are done by our other medical providers and independent hospitals for those inpatient facilities. It's more expensive for the state to run it than it is to partner with another, just a business, or some of the highest quality care actually comes from partnering with some of our major medical systems. And St. Anthony's Treatment Facility in Oklahoma City is probably the best in the state.
What other things are, besides the budget, what other things are we going to see coming from the legislature in the next few weeks? Because we only have a few weeks left.
Budget.
Well, I still have several people. I've got 5 things sent to the governor today, 3 yesterday. All 5 today were around child welfare and child abuse. And I'm really excited about one piece that requires individuals that are coming out of incarceration that have to register as sex offenders. We allow them by law to live with children if the children were not the victim of their crime, and the child's related to them. But we're going to do a little preemption, and they're to notify the Department of Human Services and that they're living with those children, so we can keep an eye on the kids and keep them safer. Got a couple of bills on education and our foster kids, trying to improve educational outcomes for foster kids. So still a whole lot of work that's getting done, and working on the budget too.
And something that's pretty exciting, I know people will know about this, but I didn't have a bill go to conference. Conference is not fun, so I'm pretty excited this year that I didn't have anything to conference. And I think county and senate bills, I think the governor signed 4 or 5 already of what I got to be a part of this year. So conference is no fun, is it? It's a lot of.
I just have 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Which
is not many for AJ.
Not
4 is not.
No.
Yeah, that's like a walk in the park for you, isn't it?
I think I've had 4 or 5 bills signed. I have to go back. I have it all on my whiteboard, and I've got a handful going to conference. Basically, the House and the Senate have to vote on the exact same language. If the House amends a Senate bill, or if the Senate amends a House bill, and you don't 100% like it, you can send it to conference, work out your differences, and bring it back. I've got a handful of bills coming to conference that we actually, some of them are just going to go there and see if we can work something out, and we'll see if they come out. Several of them actually, the Senate authors and I have an idea. We just, because of the timelines and because of our deadlines, the easiest way to fix these bills rather than amending them on the floor is to send them to conference, sign them out, and vote on them that way.
Yeah, we've got one together.
We've
It's
got
going
one
to
together.
conference.
Yeah. So the main thing is definitely going to be the budget. We're going to continue to roll out joint committees on appropriation, but is it committees or conference? I can't ever remember. JCAB is
Joint Committee on Appropriations.
Joint Committee on Appropriation of Budgets. We're going to keep rolling out some JCAB bills and work on the budget. It's been the main focus all year. It's definitely going to happen 12 or so legislative days we have left.
And what's interesting about the JCAP process, number one, is the timing, because we generally do those later in the session, and we're doing them simultaneously. That's why it's called the joint committee. So we have the same bill being heard basically at the same time in both chambers. So they have to be agreed upon before it comes to the body. And it's different in the House and in the Senate. You know, in the Senate, our entire body is members of appropriation. Our entire body are members of our JCAP committee. So it's a little bit easier for us because everybody's involved in the process. In the House, they actually have a committee. So they're not 100% sure what the response is going to be.
There's 29 on that committee out of 101.
So they're not really sure, but you know, again, the 75% threshold in the Senate is very difficult. We're down 2 members, and then we have 6 people that vote no on everything, consistently, all the time. We had 8 that voted no, that we've got 2 that we think we can move on some of the major revenue raisers, but that's still not enough votes. We still have to have help from the Ds.
So Dennis is confident that you're gonna get a budget. Are we gonna get a budget before sign to die?
I don't know.
I think we will. I think the question's going to be at that point, 1, will it pass? And 2, if it does pass, will the governor sign it? She's been very clear, because at the end of the day, if we don't have the support, if we don't have the 76 votes, if the whip counts and things come back bad, or if it's something that the Senate's not gonna hear, odds are we're probably not gonna put it on the board, so we'll pass everything we can do with 51 votes, create the budget, as bad as it may be, and go home. I think that's kind of the plan. Now, in that case, the ball's gonna be in the governor's court. I don't know if she's bluffing or not. I don't think she is this year.
I don't think you bluff. When you've been lieutenant governor, you've been in Congress, you've done everything you know you need to do. Why would she bluff?
Right.
I say if she doesn't like it, she's gonna veto it.
So you're suggesting that there is that if you come to the end and you pass what you can pass 51% of the vote, you're talking about a 14% cut for agencies.
It won't be there. I mean, we've already moved some stuff that we've agreed upon. It won't be there, but what'll happen is that at some point, like for example, Common Aid is a good example. DPS and Health, they may take like a 2, and somebody else may take a 14. You see what I'm saying? I mean, you'll start handpicking from that aspect. And so to say that somebody couldn't be at 14, I think there could be somebody at 14, but some of your major areas that I guess you'd call them a priority of legislators will take a less of a hit. The problem with is the ones we just named are about 80 cents on the dollar.
That's right. And I know we've said this before, I just want to reiterate, because there's still a handful of people within our own caucus and a lot of people out there in the general public who think we can cut our way out of this problem. By and large, across state government, we've cut government 42%. Now that's not all a bad thing. Some of that needed to happen. I mean, especially coming off some record high appropriation years and things like that. But there comes a point, and as somebody who works for an appropriated state agency, you know as well as anybody, that we have to fund core functions of government. There are just certain things that are the job of government. And if we don't, if we roll out 10% cuts across the boards, we're going to have to live with the consequences. That means letting people out of DOC. That means not prosecuting people through your office. That means not servicing children who are in the DHS system, and approving kids for adoption and foster care. That means less troopers on the high, and not just the threat of furloughing troopers, but actually having to fire troopers. Road projects that don't get done. It's a very real threat, and I mean, again, I appreciate and respect everybody I work with, but there are still some people who think there's some things to cut, and I just respectfully disagree.
What is gonna happen with the teacher raises in this whole scenario?
It depends on what we can get passed.
It is in the Senate. I'll speak for the Senate. It's a little farther down on our priority list than properly funding common education. And then we would still like to see, okay, let's get a framework. The best plan that I've seen said when we reach a certain per pupil funding level, if we get to hit the regional average, then we institute a mandatory teacher pay raise. I tend to think that if we'll really focus on base common education funding, we'll see a lot of teachers get a raise because the districts will have enough funds to pay them more, just depending on where they are. And we have districts, even in times like these, some of our off the formula districts that are doing very well. Those teachers are getting paid much higher than the state average,
Could you
even in
expl-
these days.
Could you explain to the people what off the formula schools are?
Schools are primarily, and Dennis can probably do this better than I can, but they're funded primarily and first from local revenues. If your local revenues are at a certain level and it's more than you are technically going to quote unquote need, then you don't receive the formula, state aid from the funding formula. But that's 23 districts across the state out of our 500 and however many.
And just for point of clarification, because I'm guilty, as is anybody saying they're not on the formula. They're always on the formula.
Right.
The reason that, that's the reason they're not getting state aid is because they're on the formula and they're able to locally raise the money. And an example in this area would be the OG&E plant up at Sooner Lake for Frontier. But so when you say they're not on the formula, they're on the formula, but they're not getting any state aid.
And most
There
of
is
those are-
some because of average daily haul and some things like that, but as far as per student, they're above that.
And usually it's because something like OG&E or wind farms or things like
something
that, they
big.
give them
Now,
some
keep
money.
in mind though, what's really tough is when you're really close, like you're at 98% or 97%, you're still getting the same money for somebody that's actually only bringing in, say, 30%. So you'll say, well, this school's got all this, they're 98%, and this school's 30, and they're the same. And it's like, well, that's the whole purpose of the formula, is that everybody's treated equally. The only way you actually get somewhere is with the formula, and let's just say that you're supposed to get $2 million for the amount of students you get, but you bring in locally $3 million. Now you're in pretty tall cotton, but most of them are just above whatever that allowance is, and so it's not like, in some cases they are, if you take Frontier, for example, just say that was a booming area and they had 2,500 students. They would probably be back on the state aid aspect, because I started to say formula.
It's just how we
Yeah,
say it.
that's how we
It's
say
not
it.
right,
That's
but
right.
that's how we
How we
say
say
it.
it. I'm guilty
And we
of
do
saying,
know.
yeah. So,
No, the state formula was designed to
Equity.
level the playing field, to make sure every student in the state of Oklahoma received the same amount
I
of
think
funding.
it came through the court system that way. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like they just thought it would be fair. I think the court
Finally, we
system.
figure out a way to blame the lawyer.
Yeah, it was the DA from Noble and K County.
That's exactly who it was.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Back in
thank you.
'63.
Give us enough time and we'll find a way to blame
Blame
this.
the
Stab me in the
lawyers.
back, I tell you. Well, we see already, a year before filing period even begins, that next year's election is affecting this year's budget
Right.
process. How in the world is anything gonna happen next year?
Next year's gonna be a challenge.
That's the reason we need the reoccurring revenue.
We really need to address these issues now.
And some of the recurring revenue you're talking about now won't even occur right away. Some of it's in different budget years, is that not right?
This is true. Some of the ending, some of these things can't really do a hard stop on it. You have to stop it out a little bit farther. The gross production rebates are one of those that takes a little while for those to be implemented because a lot of that has already been awarded. So, we've got to be proactive on a lot of it. And we've done some things, the wind industry's incentive period in the state is coming to a close. There's a hard stop on several things. That's July 1st of this year, so just after we finished. And I was extremely concerned about a couple of projects scheduled to go online in my district right after that time period. We were pleased to find out that they're still going to go ahead and continue those projects, which is really good news. But we got to make tough decisions now. They're not going to be any easier next year. They'll be worse.
No, and when you have getting everybody on board, and I know this process is extremely frustrating to us. It's got to be
And we understand it.
extremely frustrating to those people at home that keep up, whether it's social media, whether it's watching the news at night, however it is. The fact that you have the majority caucus, regardless of which party it is, actually admitting to having a revenue problem rather than just a spending problem is a big step in the state of Oklahoma. Realizing that we can't continue to take the kind of cuts and that agencies, that we have to fund core functions of government, when you say it out loud, it sounds like one of those things that should be common sense. But it's a very big step in the right direction. It's kind of the old, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. We do the things we can. Now, our bigger, more aggressive things probably needed. I think we would all agree on that. But the fact that the tables have turned, that even most of our average citizens are saying, okay, we have to do something because these are the things we want, is a pretty big shift. I mean, it's extremely frustrating, but politics is a slow process, and partly it's slow because we're supposed to contemplate it, we're supposed to think about it, we're not supposed to overcorrect too much. If we're
Talking
looking
about
for
780.
if we're looking for bright sides, that's how I justify it to myself, so I can sleep at night, even though it is getting tougher and tougher.
Anything else, gentlemen, lady?
Looking forward to being finished with this part of it and having more time just to come hang out in town.
Yes.
I haven't had coffee at the comeback in a while, and I would rather do that.
Well, that's one nice thing is about our representatives and senators, they are here. They come and attend things even during the session. Sometimes they have to come in and go back to work, and sometimes they're running two ways at one time, but we appreciate everything you do. Well, if you all have nothing else to say, it's a pleasure for us to be here today. I'm glad, hopefully we made some things clear, and by the next time we meet, we will have more information for you about what the budget situation, what resulted, because we'll be back next month after the session is over. It'll be on June the 1st at 1 o'clock instead of 3 o'clock. It'll be an earlier start than that. We hope to see you then. Thank you.